Yeah. So how you doing, man? How's it going?
That's going well. I'm just, you know, pretty much been sitting inside more or less for the last, 4.5 months. Um, you know, for a while in the beginning, I just got like so unmotivated with things. And, luckily I kind of had that realization of been catching up on a lot and, kind of getting back up to speed. Um,
Yeah.
but again, like you always, you see any amount of missed time when you're doing any sort of like creative endeavor where you're, making anything, and you go, "Gosh, I wish I had that back so I could have made that much more during it."
Man, definitely. Yeah, it was definitely like pretty bogged me down, bogged a lot of people at the beginning down because man, it's so depressing. Like what a
Yeah,
totally depressing situation. Like you can't hang out with your friends, you can't see your family, like and then this Black Lives Matter stuff, man, like came up and all that. I went out to protest as well, but it was like, man, that made me so sad as well. Just obviously like the George Floyd incident and uh, things surrounding that, and man, it's just yeah, it's just been a really hard time to be motivated. But I guess like you know, as artists, like people look to us to be a beacon of motivation. I guess
yeah.
sometimes. So it's like sometimes you got to just put it aside. I've been watching this uh oh man, Michael Jordan documentary.
Oh, I've heard really good things about that.
Oh man, I've only seen one episode of it, but man, just the motivation level that Michael Jordan brought to the game, to his career, to just as a person, like during tough times, and he just like stuck with basketball. He's like, I'm just gonna be
Hmm.
best at the game, best basketball player. So
It's
I
it's funny you mentioned that because I actually saw something from the NFL player Von Miller, who's
okay,
like one of the best players, and he was watching that documentary, and he was like, you know, I watched it and I realized that Jordan was doing things that I wasn't doing, and he was more motivated than I was. So that got me to do that much more. It's like, if that's enough to bring people who are already at the top of their field get even more motivated, like, that's a motivational piece for anyone. So, I'm probably gonna watch that now too.
man, I would highly recommend it. It's so cool. Yeah. um, so cool. Thanks for watching the film again. I really appreciate that, man. We're
Yeah, of course.
we're trying to get eyes on it. It's an indie film with no stars in it, so it's always hard to sell to somebody to watch,
Yeah.
um, especially somebody at like a big agency or something like that. So, you know, really appreciate it. What did you think? Like, what kind of things did you like or dislike or whatever?
So what I'll say first is like whenever anyone sends me something, I never have any idea sort of like who's behind it or, who's involved or kind of what the quality is, especially
Right.
on an indie film. So like I never, you know, have any sort of expectations going in. So it was like really pleasant surprise at it's like how solid the production quality was like throughout the entire way. Um, like having like well done gunfights and having a plane throughout and all these like, one thing I've noticed is when you have kind of like outdoor scenes, especially somewhere in the desert where there's not much cloud cover, like you can get really harsh sunlight that's gonna just totally ruin the lighting of a shot.
Mm.
And I mean, most of that movie takes place, outside in the desert or somewhere desert adjacent, and like it all works. There's no point where I'm watching it and go, oh, okay, yeah, this was just a couple of guys like doing their first or second feature. Um, so it looked good, and I'm of the opinion I see movies that have like 2.5, 3 hour run times, and I saw that this was like 82 minutes with credits. And I was
Right.
like, you know what? That's awesome. If you can tell your story in 82 minutes, like great, because it means that you've got it tight. It's not going to be bloated. There's not going to be like a B and C plot line that might or might not get resolved. Like you've got your story and you're going to tell it, and that's it.
Man, that's an awesome observation. And yeah, and you're more. I mean, I'm more willing to give a movie I don't know anything about a chance.
Yeah.
A little bit, a little bit shorter. Um, yeah, man. So it was all shot on location in Arizona, actually. So my really good friend and bandmate of our band Miscellaneous. I'm wearing a shirt right now. Uh, so
Good
he's
placement.
yeah, so his name's Kyle Moore. He plays piano brilliantly, and he's an amazing filmmaker, director, editor, producer. And so he wrote the script with a buddy. They went out to Arizona, um, or Kyle actually went out to Arizona to visit a really good friend who
Hmm.
Carr Cavender, who
Oh,
helped
okay.
who produced the movie as well. Um, so Carr has this big ranch property out in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. And I think Kyle went on there. Yeah, he went on a trip just to like check it out and just fell in love with the location. And they had this access to a plane. And so
Oh.
all the things kind of started bubbling for those guys, and they're like, okay, this is the movie using this location. So they did a couple runs out there, like location scouting shoots, like, okay, what scenes do we have? And they just like took a bunch of footage, put it together, and they were like, cool, we're going to use this place for this scene. And so they kind of like backwards engineered the movie based on the location,
Hmm.
uh, which I thought was pretty neat. And so yeah, it was just a really interesting situation. And I'm trying to think of the other things that you mentioned that you wanted to know about, but I can't really think of them right now.
That's all right. But
Yeah.
okay, so that makes a lot of sense because I saw it was I think it was like crowdfunded on Indiegogo and it raised
Yep.
like 200 grand, which like for for like an indie like family drama like where it takes place in a house or something like that's a good amount. But I was like, how did they how did they get access to a plane? How are they able to do all these on location shots? And that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know. I think like it's there's a little like kind of tension there because I think it's nice to write like a script and make the movie that you want without any sort of like inhibitions. But at the same time, you have to, especially when you have a really low budget, you have to be conscious of those restrictions. So to be able to see, oh, we have access to this ranch land, to an airplane, to XYZ, like let's use that to make a movie. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's so Kyle, man, he's crazy. He's a really creative dude, and a lot of locations that he just places that he visits in life. He's like, oh my god, like right here, this could be the scene where whatever, and it's just cool, man. So I could definitely see him doing some more movies like that
Hmm.
in the future based on the location, um, which is interesting. Uh,
Right. So then that's obviously how you got brought in to do the score, being a Spaniard.
Exactly. And then actually, Carr, our producer, had a stint in Miscellaneous, the band, as our drummer.
Oh,
He's a musician as well. So I knew him really well. And so it was just nice, like working with friends, like putting the project together. Um, and we actually, one of the first festivals that we got into with this film was in Tucson, which was really close to
hmm,
where they shot the movie in Arizona. Uh, and I had never been out there because I wasn't, I'm just post production
right.
through the score. But I went out to this festival with them. We all drove out, and it was so fun and like so full circle for me to see like scenery that I've scored
Yeah.
to for like I don't know 6 months or whatever, however long it took me, to see it in person. It was like a total full circle moment, which was like super cool.
That is cool. So were you familiar at all with that area beforehand, or I mean, was your first experience basically by seeing the footage?
Yep, seeing the footage. Yeah, I did some research in the of the area as well, just like what happened around there, what's going on
Hmm.
around there, and I wanted to. So we really set out to make a western. Like they set out to make a western film, modern day western, um, and so we wanted the score to have some of those spaghetti western elements going on, but with like a more modern twist to it because it is set in present day, or you know, I guess so.
Right.
Yeah, or in some weird,
It's modern enough, right?
yeah, modern day. So I did some research about like the Native American tribes around there and tried to incorporate some of those elements from their music, especially like in that region of Arizona as well, because a lot of spaghetti westerns draw from the more California,
Mm.
uh, Indian, Native American tribes, and so I wanted to like grab some stuff that people wouldn't really like here in a western, and kind of make it more specific to that region, I guess.
That's interesting because one of the things that like stuck out to me was the use of percussion, and especially the like how it sounded,
Yeah,
because it's really common in like in movie scores when you're having an action sequence or a more kind of like high intensity one that you're going to have kind of like a frantic tense drumming, and it will often sound really similar across scores. So listening to the score and watching the film, it really stuck out to me that like, oh, this is a really distinct different sound from so many other scores I listen to.
yeah, exactly. I didn't want to use a whole lot of like stock, um you know kind of sounds for a movie score, because it's also indie, and I wanted the score to have like a lot of character to it as
Mm,
well. But yeah, man, I played a lot of these drums live just in my studio,
really.
and like ran it through my guitar pedals, and like that was that more modern flair, I guess. But it was cool, man. I listened to a ton of Native American music I'd never heard before. I actually wrote a lot of the score when I was up in Alaska. um, I was just visiting, and I just went on some walks and kind of got like a lot of the main themes down. And just like being out just with these massive mountains, like it didn't put me in Arizona, but it put me in like nature, and I felt like a lot of the movie had to do with
Mhm.
interacting with nature. So I wanted to try to try to capture that as well.
That's really interesting, and I think that really comes through particularly strongly, like I mentioned to you earlier, in those scenes where it's kind of just traveling through the wilderness, where it's basically just image and music. There's not much action or dialogue. It's just the marriage of those two, and I think like those were definitely some of the strongest moments.
Mm, thanks. Yeah, it was super fun, man. It was my first feature I've ever done too, so I was like, chomping at the bit, like
Yeah.
really excited.
So I mean, because of that, then I take it like you didn't have a sort of like composing ritual down. You hadn't done a dozen features and like worked out your process for it. I mean, what was your approach to doing this as your first one?
So just all wrong. Just totally wrong. Just everything I started was just wrong. And so I had to, yeah, you're right. I mean, I had to figure out my own personal workflow and organization system. Um, on the technical side, on the creative side, everything. And it took a while to get into the groove. And I did some things at the beginning where I'm like, why did I do that? I just wasted so much time. But yeah, but it was great. I mean, now that I have that experience under my belt, actually every film that I've done, short film that I've
Mm.
done, is this one. I'm like, okay, gonna do this first. Like, not gonna do this other bullshit that took forever. So yeah.
Right. So I mean, what was looking back then? What was like the if you could boil it all down, like the process you would have done starting from day one?
The process I would have done starting from day one. I mean, okay, to be honest, I think I did a lot of things well. Like, okay, writing the themes
Mm.
first. Got to write the themes first. Why would you even? Why would you even try to write a movie score if you don't have your themes figured out? And I had most of them figured out, but I think I got a little bit ahead of myself before I really had them ironed out the way that I
Mm.
want. So I'd have to go back in and like reharmonize some things or like retool the melody, re-record whatever, um, you know, and that sucked. And then also I work in Logic, and what do you work in? I'm just curious.
Oh, I haven't made music in
Oh,
quite a
okay,
few years. So
okay,
I gave up my music career back in like 2015, I think. But way back then, I was doing stuff in Ableton.
okay. Yeah, Ableton's great too. Yeah, man, just figuring out the workflow in Logic for a project that's that size was interesting.
Mm.
And like it's just with with like the tempo adjustment within Logic. Like I have the movie like going in there. This is so like nerdy and technical, but whatever. I guess it's the whole point of this interview.
Exactly.
But it's just like, I put in something, and if I adjust something that is before the score that I am currently working on, everything gets fucked up because it's all mapped to the tempo. So I just had to talk to a bunch of composers. I read a
Mm.
bunch of books that I've never read before, and that was invaluable information. And like just little tiny tricks like that. Like I talked to this other composer was that said, don't do the built-in like metronome kind of mapping thing. Man, just record audio of a metronome and just put that in there. And that
Interesting.
way you'll be able to just shuffle around slide, especially with a huge project like that.
Huh.
Anyway, just little tiny things that save literally hours of work.
Wow.
It's just crazy.
And
But
then now in after doing all that, you can appreciate how somehow Ennio Morricone did like 500 scores over 50 years.
oh my god, man. Yeah, it's so impressive, man. So impressive. Yeah.
And so, and speaking of him, who were some of the kind of like spaghetti western composers, or what were some of the films that you watched to get in the zone and draw some inspiration from?
Yeah, of course. I definitely went back to Ennio. Good, Bad, and the Ugly, one of the best film scores of all time.
Mm.
Um, and I definitely, I def was. It's such a weird score. It's so strange. The instrumentation of it, like the use of vocals as well in that score, is just like, what the hell are you? What are you? What are you on right now? Feels like a peyote trip. Like the whole thing. Not that I've ever done that. But yeah, so definitely went back to all those old movies. What was the one? Man, I can't think of any of the movies right now. But
Put you on the spot.
yeah, I sat down and I definitely went back and listened to a lot of those. Um, there were some other things. The Breaking Bad score
Mm.
was actually something that I listened to for inspiration, and that was something that Kyle, the director, and I talked about before we did it, um, because it has this I don't know, it's got this electronic kind of thing to it, but it also has like I don't know if it's like a tribal or like native kind of flavor to it,
Mm.
uh, that ties the story of that whole thing together like
Right.
so brilliantly.
And,
Um,
and I'm not gonna like have the hot take of saying Breaking Bad is a western, but at the
yeah,
same time, like it is. Anything that's set in the American Southwest is automatically going to have like some parallels to it. So when you have a what's it set in Albuquerque, I think, like an Albuquerque crime show, like you know that's going to have some analogs to an Arizona crime film. Even if you're getting technical and the genres are different, there's still crossover between the two. So that makes sense.
yeah, I think that's exactly it. Trying to capture whatever that essence of Arizona is. Yeah, and just the way that score was approached, the Bad
Mm.
score in a modern day setting, which was like really interesting um, to have that there. So yeah, it's basically Breaking Bad meets Ennio Morricone. Like that is literally what we talked about before. um, before we started scoring. And then once we got into it, it kind of developed its own identity.
Hmm.
We were able to make some choices to be like, oh, well, this happened earlier in the film, or this happens later, and then it has its own voice to Helen Gone, you know, as a score, as we
Yeah,
move.
well, and I think that's one of the interesting things about the scores. You know, you hear like some instrumentation that's like it's much more obviously like a callback or influenced by those, like you know, like some of the whistling. You know, you hear Western whistling, and you're automatically going to think of those films. But at the same time, you know, at least like kind of my take when listening to it is as the film progresses, the score goes from a much more like Western acoustic bass, and the electronic influences get more and more apparent, and some of the instrumentation that was really clean early on feels kind of distorted and modified, and so it kind of like takes on the whole atmosphere of like this movie just like degrading into like a violent chaos.
Man, thank you for picking up on that, man. That's exactly what I actually set out to do with this
Hmm.
is I wanted the villains to have to be electronic instruments, and I wanted the heroes to have the acoustic instruments, and then once they meet, like kind of all bets are off, you know. So that was very intentional for sure, and it's awesome to hear someone like pick up on that. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that was intentional because I didn't want to sound like a total idiot reading too much into it. But
Oh
I mean,
man,
I think it works really well, and it's especially like you mentioned, because the first, for anyone who hasn't seen it, the first maybe third or half of the film, you kind of have these two narratives going side by side, where you have your villains going on their path and your protagonists going on their other, and then like they clash, and that's like it really sets up that musical clash and kind of amalgamation in the second half of the film.
that's it, man. Yeah. And I felt like there was something really menacing that I was getting with the electronic sound. So
Mm.
I just leaned into it the whole way with all of the villains, and they all kind of had their own little, you know, things happening. Crazy story, funny story. Is this family friendly show or whatever?
I don't know. Whatever this ends up being, whether it's just on YouTube, or if it, depending on how the quality is, the audio visual quality, like maybe I'll put it in a podcast. This will be the first episode, so this will determine whether it's family friendly or whether it's X rated.
Okay, cool. I mean, this is, you know, this it's a silly story. But it's a really great story about the score. So, um, I I'm a session guitarist. I play in bands, whatever. And I was out on the road with a band that I play with regularly, and we have a horn section, and there's a trumpet player. Been friends with the guys with this guy for years, and uh, okay, I mean, I'll tell you the whole story. So we got in the night before the gig. We ordered a bunch of weed, okay, a bunch of weed, and none of it showed up on Weed Maps, and we are like, ah man, bummer. So we have like this afternoon gig the next day, and we get to the gig. It's this outdoor festival, beautiful festival in San Jose, and and right as we finish our set, we get off stage, and the Weed Maps guy shows up with just the most amount of weed ever. And we have like 4 hours until our plane leaves. And we're like, okay, let's just get really high, just finish all this before we leave. So we finish all of it before we leave, walk around this park, and we're in the airport in this super resonant space and just random place. We're like super baked. And Matt, the trumpet player, starts whistling, and when he whistled, like he has an old west whistle. Like he makes one sound, and you're just like, oh my god, cowboys, tumbleweed. Like, you know, you're just like in there immediately. And I was like, holy shit, how long have you been able to do this? I've been scoring a western for the past like 4 months, dude. And I literally I was looking for somebody to whistle. Like, I was resorting to Craigslist, like, because I can't whistle at all. And for him to just have that sound just right off the bat, I was just like, dude, this is crazy. So I was like, hey man, come over next week. He plays trumpet as well, so all the
Hmm.
trumpet. lines you hear on the score are him. Um, brilliant guy, brilliant musician, Matt Matera, Peabody trained, just reads music like nobody's business. He's awesome. Uh, and so yeah, man. So I wrote all these whistling parts for him. He came in and laid it down, and it just like changed everything,
That's
man.
awesome.
Changed the whole score. It was so crazy. Sorry, I had to tell that whole story.
Oh,
It's just
I mean, that's great though. It is like it's so cool that it happened in that window too. It's like divine intervention.
it was the strangest thing, man. It was so weird, but yeah, I felt like a lot of things surrounding this movie and surrounding the score had very like serendipitous, like
Hmm.
I don't know, just events. Like the fact that we're shooting in this property that's owned by the producer and his family. Like the fact that we have that, as you said, in the first place is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, so nuts. Anyway, talking so much.
That's the point though.
I guess it is.
If you gave one word answers, this would be not only the shortest, but the most boring interview that's ever been done.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't worry at all.
Okay. Cool. Nice. Um, yeah, man. So yeah, it was. I guess I don't know. That's pretty much that's the score in a lot of ways.
I mean, that's great. And so, you said you've done short films before. I mean, how did those two experiences compare?
Um, man, I mean, it's just 100 times more work. And I think the whole my album, or sorry, my score is available on Spotify and iTunes as well. I'm just going to say that on this one as well. And there's like maybe 25 tracks or something like that, but when it really came down to it, like I probably did 60 tracks for the for the movie. Like probably between. And another funny thing we did too is we just had to record all these commercials, just random commercials. So I hired some voice actors. In fact, let me see if I got some of these. I'll play you some.
All right.
Really, really silly. Uh, just a moment here. But yeah, man, we hired some voice actors and we just wrote a ton of just super random commercials we could just stick in. Let's see if I got it here fast. Aha. Cool. Can I share my screen with you? Oh, could you make me a co-host, please?
Oh,
That's possible.
um,
It's just the three dots on my window on the top right. If you scroll over.
oh, all right, I see. So I'm gonna have to do some editing on this after it's done. But if I make you because it has make host,
Yeah,
will that screw up the recording?
it will not actually. I did
Okay.
this on Monday with somebody,
Oh,
so
all
we're
right.
good.
Okay, cool.
Hmm. Cool. Nice. I'm gonna share my audio with you, and yeah, there we go. Let's just see if you got this. So this commercial opens up the whole. It's the first thing you hear in the movie. There's a new sheriff in town. He walks with pride, confidence, and a little attitude. He protects the weak and stands up tall for what he knows is right. But there's one question everyone's dying to know. Hey, partner. Where'd you get those boots? Come on down to Boot Complex with the best deals in town for all your boot needs. We've got hunting boots, cowboy boots, army boots, rain boots, work boots, motorcycle boots,
and much more. This weekend only. Come on down to Boot Complex.
Yeah, so you get the idea.
Yeah.
we did a whole bunch of, oh man, this one's silly too.
They're not in the kitchen. They're not in the living room. They're not under this rock. They're not in this canyon. who could have stolen my delicious crunchy oat cereal?
Mwahaha! It was me, Crunch Grabber.
Oh no, not Crunch Grabber.
Yes, and now this crunchy, oaty goodness is all mine. I can just taste it now. With this nutritional and...
Anyway, so yeah, we just had a bunch of these because the main character had this radio that was kind of a theme. And at any point, you know, it had to go to commercials. So we didn't even use, I think we probably used like 3 out of the 6 or 7 that we made. But it was just a nice thing to have to jump to, you know, once whatever was happening on the radio happened. Yeah. So
I'm actually really glad you showed those because, I mean, I think most people, like, you know, me included, you don't really, unless it's something that's so upfront, like you don't even think about all those extra things that go on.
Not at all. And in the man, we did this super indie because, man, there's also like we could have just gone on libraries as well, but there's something really charming about just creating our own thing. I actually did a bunch of mariachi music cues as well because there's this like Mexican restaurant and they needed like 4 songs to show like time passing. So I just did like 4 mariachi songs really fast. I made you the host because I thought about it.
I'll make it back.
All right, cool.
There we go.
I'll show you one of these. So when these appear in the movie, they're just like totally filtered out, way in the background. Like you can't even really make out what's going on. So this one's really silly, man. Let me see. I don't know which one it is. They're not labeled. Not that one. Not that one. That one's nice though. Anyway, there's one where I sing, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I just like I just sang some random Spanish poetry I found online. I mean, it's just ridiculous filmmaking, man. It's like, because it's all just in the background, like no one's really gonna be like, wait a second, what's he talking about? It's just like atmosphere, man. It's so crazy what you can get away with.
It's funny because that's it, you know, the diner scene, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so I noticed that there's music going on, but it's like you said, it's so in the background and filtered out that like you recognize it and then it just kind of, you know, disappears into the scene. It's funny and it's something that like no one's gonna realize that you made, you know, 6 or 4 like, you know, minute or 2 minute long songs in order to like beef that up.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. But it was fun. Yeah, and when Kyle, you know, we first had our spotting session, we watched the whole movie top to bottom, and man, that's a really fun part of filmmaking, is the spotting session. It's like we watch the whole thing for the first time together with the director, and we go, okay, music, it feels like there should be music here, right? Okay, cool, let's put some music here, and it stops here, and then, okay, here's some dialogue. Okay, oh, there should be some music here. So I really enjoyed that. And when I was putting this together with Kyle for the first time, he was like, all right, so he paused it on the diner scene, and he's like, I have a big ask for you. And I'm like, all right, Kyle, what's up? And he's like, I need 4 mariachi songs. And I'm like, oh. And I was like, cool, let's do it. So.
I mean, was that, you know, were you taken aback at first? Like, all right, how do I do mariachi music in the first place? Or, you know, were you comfortable enough with all, you know, with your background on the various projects you have that you're like, okay, I can do this?
I gotta say, living in LA, I hear mariachi music daily. So I was like, cool. Like I'm pretty sure. Like I know what's gonna happen. It's not the best mariachi music in the world, but it's passable. And it sounds like
Yeah. Yeah,
it.
absolutely. There wasn't a point where I was like, oh, what? Like this scene's getting
Yeah.
ruined.
Yeah, totally. That's it. Yeah. Oh man.
There's one other thing I wanted to ask, and you mentioning it's like reading a random Spanish poem, jogged my memory. In the first track on the release, I think it's Dead Wreckage.
Yeah.
There's there's like a sort of muffled chanting going on,
Yeah.
and are they actually saying anything, or is it just like a nonsense vocalization?
Yeah, it's me, just doing a nonsense vocalization, very much styled in an Ennio Morricone kind of kind of way. You know, I'm not sure if I mean I'm sure that he's using actual phrases in his scores, um, but I was like, I just need the effect. Like, I don't really need to
Yeah.
say it, you know. But yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm a vocalist. That's like one of my main things that I do. So it was fun to find little spots to
Hmm.
add some, and listening to all these native vocal styles as well was really fun, and trying to emulate that. And then of course like trying to throw some kind of modern twist on the whole thing was cool.
Right. I mean, that's awesome. And so I take it that was, that was also your vocals on the kind of like bonus track.
Yeah, yeah. So that was yeah. So I had scored the instrumental for the gunfight scene,
Mhm.
and I was like, man, like I don't know where this chord progression came from, but it just sounds like an old cowboy song or something. And then I was just up late one night, like scoring the film, and I just wrote lyrics and just recorded a vocal just as an option, on that either in that scene or just I kind of had the idea of releasing it on
Mhm.
Spotify and iTunes, and I was like, it'd be cool if there was like an alternate just at the end that was just like one song, like original song from the motion picture.
I
So
mean, and there's there are very like divided opinions on putting in like vocal tracks in with a like a film score release like that.
hmm.
I think it works really well in this case, like especially coming at the end because I was listening to it I don't know maybe this morning or yesterday. I was like, gosh, I don't remember if that was actually in the film or not. Like it doesn't. It sounds familiar, but not completely familiar. So I immediately went to the credits because I was like, you know, like a vocal track doesn't really fit elsewhere, but like it would be totally fitting, for the 3-4 minute long credit sequence.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could have worked as a credit thing. If it was a longer credit sequence,
Mm.
it could have worked a little better. But yeah, I mean that's exactly why I put it on on
Yeah.
there. People ask questions and like, what the hell? Where did this come from? Like who's singing on this? Like, what's going on? So I like adding those kinds of things.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it worked out well. I mean, and so earlier you said that you did like 60 tracks or so for the film, and there's I don't know 20-25 that make it onto the soundtrack. So I mean, obviously there was a little like picking and choosing, especially with throwing the vocal track on. I mean, what was the process on making the release? It's I'm this is a random question, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut
No,
myself off there.
No, that's a cool question actually. Because yeah, it was something I definitely had to think about when I was putting together the soundtrack. Um, what's going to be on it, what's not. And I did it in chronological order from the movie. I left a couple things out because I wanted from start to beginning of the actual soundtrack to be this experience, so everything kind of flows into each other. And I actually had to like touch up a couple ends and
Mm,
beginnings of some of the score tracks to make it to have that feeling so someone can just put it on or like be out on a walk or something and like just listen to the whole thing seamlessly. Like I what's the Tom York score that he released pretty recently? I
he
can't think
did
of it.
Suspiria, I think.
Suspiria, that's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. anything that guy does or anything
Right.
Radiohead does, it's like it's the whole thing is like a cohesive like experience, man. I really dig that about long form, music.
Hmm.
Um, so so yeah, that's what I was thinking, and I didn't want to have any of the mariachi stuff in it because I think it would kind of kill the vibe, and
Yeah.
there's other things that I'm like, it's just kind of too short, or like I kind of accomplished this thing in another track or whatever. So,
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If you do a like a deluxe re-release in the future, you could put in the commercials and the mariachi music and throw everything in. But I think for I feel the same way for a like a film score release of it being a cohesive listen, because especially if you have it on in the background, and then like a mariachi song comes on, and like it will just totally throw you out of it. But
yeah,
I also appreciate that it's like, I remember, 25, 30 minutes long. It there's nothing that feels too abrupt, but like it doesn't overstay its welcome either. It's a really nice balance.
yeah,
Like if for a Star Wars score that's an hour and a half, like you know, great. I'll listen to that. I'll listen to 2 hours. I'll listen to 2.5 hours. But that's such a like rare piece of composing.
yeah. On a 3-hour movie too, so
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
twice as much score at least. Man, those Star Wars movies, there's always something happening in the score. Always something happening at all times, especially in a very bad way. Oh man, I shouldn't be talking shit, but in a bad way with those three reboot ones from
Mm.
the 2000s. Man, there is just some man. There's just some kind of score happening at all times. I'm just like, man, I just need a break. I just need a break. Somehow I need to get rid of Jar Jar Binks, and it's like, yeah, I'm just kidding.
Fortunately, I don't think I've seen those since they were out in theaters. I tried rewatching one of them with some friends a few years ago, and I think we got 5 minutes in. I was like, why?
Yeah,
Like, why? We were gonna, spend another 2.5 hours watching this.
yeah, they're bad. They're really bad. I can't. I did the same thing. I couldn't get through it. Try to watch it again. Yeah,
Yeah,
crazy.
I don't think you're gonna catch too much flack from anyone for not being a fan of those.
Yeah, I guess not. Well, cool. Uh, anything else, man?
uh, no, I mean, I think I don't want to take over your whole day, so I think, I mean, that touches on kind of so much of just like of the score, the process, like the film itself, and kind of your work too. I guess like one follow up thing is that being your first feature. Like, do you have any other work coming out on the horizon?
I do. Yes, I'm working on a short horror film
Hmm.
with a couple friends of mine out here. Not really sure when it's going to be released. It's still in the post production phase, but the score is really awesome. It's my first horror film score. So, and I'm a huge horror movie nut. So it was
Nice.
like, yes, finally I get to do it. Um, and I really hope to do some more of this stuff too, because I like doing music that's a little darker, a little edgier.
Mhm.
Uh, so it was really fun to find those moments in this new film. It's called OK Plus, by the way.
Interesting.
Um,
All right.
look out for that. I'll send you
Okay.
a link, or
Yeah, let me know. And gosh, maybe this was starting like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I actually started writing an article series on short films, like short film music in particular. So like I'm trying to do it that it got more interest than I expected. So I'm trying to do it monthly, where I cover about like 6 short films, because now that I've started getting into it, like there are like infinite short films, and I don't think people cover them enough. So I'm trying to give them a little bit of coverage at least.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool, man. Especially right now, everyone has so much time to sit down
Yeah.
and everyone's just watching stuff. I'm watching so many more things that I would have not watched. Especially older things, man. Like I'm going back and watching some of the really great movies, and that's been cool because we've been so saturated with
Yeah.
things coming out that aren't that good, things coming out that aren't that good, things coming out that aren't that good, and so it's like when you go back and you see the real things that stood the test of time, you're like, okay, all right, like this is what content is, this is what a movie is, it's just like really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so true. Like, so last year I listened to something around like 750 or so like scores that released in 2019. So that's 750 films that released in 2019, and like you can imagine that in like 50 years, how many of those are people going to be talking about? Like it's going to be a handful, and like presumably the best of them. So then when you take a film from 1950 or 60 or 70 that like was in a year with hundreds of releases, and that's one that people still talk about, you go, gosh, there's got to be like something about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's just the workmanship, it's like you can't rush a quality product. You cannot rush. That's the thing you lose,
Yeah.
quality. Yeah. So with just all these crazy deadlines of Netflix, like, oh, we gotta release something today because you as a consumer have already watched all our other
Yeah.
shit. Like, here's something new. It's not that good, but here you go.
It'll fill your appetite for the next 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I was talking to a musician recently um, who grew up in the 80s and he hated 80s music. He was just like, this is just the worst fucking music of all time. So he went back. He went back to the 60s and 70s and listened to all those albums and was like, okay, all right, cool. Like you know, this is great stuff. I don't know, just a thing I thought of.
No, I mean that's awesome, and it's I don't know, I think people like have an issue of how a lot of music today has like homages to prior decades. Like I think having all of the 20th century's music available now, or all the 20th century's movies available, like it gives you so much to kind of like be inspired from or learn from, or like if you hear like a killer idea or see something amazing, like you can learn from it, and so I don't know, I think that's really cool. I mean, there's like unlimited good content out there already, and if you're not looking at it, you're really missing out.
You're right, man. I mean, that's it too. There's endless inspiration out there, especially in this older stuff, man, where they had to figure it out. Like they didn't even have computers. Like how the how the hell did they do that? They really had to figure it out in order to make this great concept. And the concept had to be great enough for them to innovate and develop something where they could capture that concept, you know.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's like we have the ability to capture it, but we're you know we're choosing to capture the other things that aren't of high quality. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's crazy. There is some good stuff coming out. I just saw, what did I watch the other day? I mean, it came out a while ago, but I thought Bird Box was really cool.
I haven't seen that. It was like the biggest Netflix show whenever it came out, and somehow apparently both of us like totally missed the craze like a year and a half ago at this point, I think.
Yeah, I missed the hype on most things, and I watched like way after. And that was definitely one of those. It was the first time I've seen it, but it was cool. It was really
Nice.
cool. It's a great movie. Yeah.
So I'll keep my eyes open for it. I have the issue of kind of like a selection fright. 'Cause I have maybe like 5 different streaming subscriptions,
Yeah.
and so it's like if I watch like 3 movies a week, like how do I when I have the option of 10,000 movies, like how do I pick one? So
It's,
I tell people that I'm going to add it to my watch list, and I realize like my watch list is like 500 movies.
yeah. Yeah, man, there's a lot out there. There's a lot out there. Yeah.
All right, before I let you go, there was
Yeah.
one other thing I wanted to mention, totally unrelated to all this.
Cool.
You went to Western, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I went to U of M.
No way. My
Or-
mom went to U of M. So,
Really?
yeah.
So
Um,
that's crazy.
another crazy thing, our director Kyle is from Chicago. So there's a serendipitous Chicago connection. There you go, right there.
It's wild.
I saw you were from there. I was like, cool. I'm gonna tell you that on the interview that Kyle is from Chicago.
I'm not from there. I'm a very new transplant, but I'm taking his place. He left and I've moved here.
There you go. Yep. Nice. Well, right on, man. I'm gonna get going here, but thank you so much for having me. This is super
Yeah,
fun.
thanks for jumping on. I'm really happy that not only were you open to doing a video interview, but like that you suggested it, because it's something I've had on my mind for a long time, because it's such a better way to talk and kind of get ideas out there. So yeah, man, I really appreciate it, and I will kind of let you know when I'm going to put all this out there, how I'm going to do it, and everything. It's unfortunately this is the first one, so there's going to be a little bit of experimenting on my end. But
Oh man, take your time. I was happy to help. How did you find me, by the way, or how did you find out about the film?
Every Friday is generally when new film scores get released, and so
Sure.
I use this website called soundtracks.net that
Okay.
typically tracks like the release date of every new score, every re-release, every TV, game, short film score. So I just I have, this is gonna sound really nerdy. I have like all these lists on my computer of like broken down by month of I write down every score that comes out. As I listen to it, I take little notes, and then like when the month's over, I'll revisit the list and write about a handful of them. So I saw that score on there, I checked it out, and I enjoyed it.
Man, so cool. That's awesome. I love that. I gotta be honest. I was like, cool. I'm just gonna release my film score. Like, I want to share with my family, friends, like, and I want it to be like out in the world, just so check it out if they stumbled upon it. But it's really cool, man, to hear that you are specifically seeking to
Yeah.
listen to film scores. That's really rad. Is there an X? What's it called? Soundtracks?
Yeah, I think it's soundtracks.net.
Soundtracks.
It's CKS.
Oh, okay. Let me check that out here. .net. I'm curious. Okay, cool, man. I'll
Yeah,
check
and
this
you
out.
can you can search by film or by composers. So you can search yourself on there, and it'll pop up with To Hell and Gone.
Crazy. I'm gonna. Who the hell? Who does? Who's
I don't
doing?
know. I don't know, but it is, without this, like I wouldn't be able to do like 90% of what I'm doing. So it's like whoever it is, bless you, because it's like such an amazing service.
Wow, what a cool resource. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know about any other ones like this, or I'm sure you do?
That's honestly, that's the only one that I know of. I mean, like I said, in 2019, I listened to about 750 releases from that year, and 95% of them came from there. Like I follow some film music focused record labels, and so sometimes I'll see like they'll mention a release that's not on there, or I follow a lot of different film composers, so sometimes they'll mention like they have a release coming out. But I mean that thing is so all encompassing.
Yeah. Cool. I'm gonna dig in. I'll check that out. That sounds great. Yeah. Nicholas, great to talk to you, man. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and thanks for jumping on, and I really appreciate it. I have no idea what time it is, but whatever time it is, like this went for a lot longer than I expected in a very good way. So
Cool. Glad.
I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate it too, man. The questions you had were really cool, and I feel like I got to share some really cool stories about how
Yeah.
the came together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I hope everyone listening enjoys them too, and hopefully some people listening are also like fledgling composers or wannabe film composers, so they can get far enough into where they hear your advice and, save them a few hours here and there.
Hey man, I'm still, what was that, fledgling? I'm
Yeah.
very much fledgling, so that's a nice word. Cool. Uh, well, awesome, man. And you just DM me on Instagram, right? Like you checked out the score and then
Yeah,
it
I had.
you.
So what had happened is I had gotten like super behind on my like monthly write up, and so I did my one for June like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And so I had an Instagram story mentioning your score, and
Okay.
then you contacted me about it right after that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yes, I remember that now. Yeah, that's rad, man. I really hope that you find more composers to talk about, like in this fashion.
I hope so too, and I think like obviously huge name composers like Hans Zimmer and John Williams, like they can get onto any publication or website or like
Yeah,
show they want.
of course.
But that's like a small group of the composers, and then I think there's so many other people who do such good work that like you know don't make it into that like echelon, and you know people aren't as interested in writing about them or talking with them. So I think there's a lot of people who like want to talk about their work. I mean, like hell, you take this is a score you work on for 6 months. Like there's so much about it that you don't want to just like keep inside and never really talk about. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping so too.
That would be the word of advice to for any fledgling composer is just take these opportunities to talk to people about your score, about your project, about your music, like or else nobody knows, you know. And
Yeah, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna like cut out just that snippet and use it as some good self advertising.
yeah, you should. You definitely should, man. All right, dude, I'm gonna roll, but
All
really
right.
good talking to you.
Yeah, it's great talking to you too. Have a good evening, man,
Yeah,
and a
you
good
too.
weekend and everything.
All right, stay safe, man.
All
Have a
right,
good
you too. See ya.
All right, bye, Nicholas.